Did I mention I was supposed to be in Florida? Oh, I did. That's right. One of the things that I'm always struck by at a conference like this is the amount of insight, the number of insights and the amount of information that we're presented with. There are, as you've already seen, there are some extraordinary speakers with extraordinary knowledge and understanding about the issues that we all face every day in trying to help people unlock their talent in a business environment. I read something the other day that I think is really important. I'm really interested in the psychodynamics of leadership. I spend a lot of my time thinking about that and helping people through that lens. This is how our brains work. We hear something, we believe it to be true, and only sometimes later, if we have the time or inclination, do we think about it and vet it and then determine whether it is in fact true or not. Which explains a lot, actually, about the last election, for instance, because we are literally wired to believe the things that we hear. May not seem intuitive, but in fact is scientifically proven. The point being that we're going to get access to a lot of information and insight over the next 2 days. And it's impossible, clearly, for all of you to go back to your jobs and start to do most of this stuff. You'll be able to do a very small amount of this stuff, both because of the demands placed on you and the dynamics that you're already facing and the way your organizations are structured and the priorities and the initiatives that are going on. I don't have to tell you, you're dealing with all of this. The thing that I would like to continue to stress for you, each of you, throughout the course of the next 2 days, is to really decide at the end of the day, what difference do you want to make? Right? As you listen to and absorb all of this stuff and filter it, what difference do you want to make? Because you have positions of enormous influence, and you can make incredible things happen. And so distilling all of this down into one or two things that are really the difference you want to make, I think will allow you to take all of this information and decide how to use it most effectively. So let's get on with the morning. We are now going to welcome to the stage a woman who is a change agent. And we all know that businesses today live by one simple rule: disrupt or be disrupted, change or be changed. Madison Avenue is going through change as much and probably more than any other industry I can think of. And if you can't manage change, the good news is that you won't have to worry about it for too long. You won't be around to deal with it. Our next speaker is here to help elevate our change management strategies, and she's going to help better shepherd employees through agency transformation. Bree Groff is the CEO of Nobel. They're a group of innovation consultants. They train organizations to embrace new attitudes and adopt new behaviors so that they can, in fact, create new opportunities in the marketplace and create new cultural conditions. For more than a decade, Bree has been focused on transformation, innovation, and organizational design. She's worked with leaders at companies that include Dentsu, J. Walter, MC Saatchi, Calvin Klein, and Adobe. She's founded and led an innovation department. She's advised leaders as a service design consultant. She's explored communications, decision-making, and interpersonal chemistry as a psychology researcher. Please welcome Bree Groff.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, what every leader wants is to suggest an idea for change, have their people say, "Brilliant," and then go about perfectly executing. Just another day at the office, becoming the brand or agency or HR department of the future. But it's never that easy. The good news for us is that I get a job because of that. We are a change agency. That means that we work with leaders to not only survive change, but actually to get good at it. We do this through trainings, offsites, embedded consulting, where we are working side by side with business unit leaders, HR leaders, executives of all types, brands and agencies alike, to help them lead the transformation in their organization. We work with lots of leaders. The very best ones are the ones that have ambition and empathy in equal measure. The ones who see change as an opportunity to do something really incredible with their people, not as something to be feared. Those are our clients. And these are some logos so that we look legitimate. spoiling the surprise. Okay. You do have an envelope in front of you. Don't open it just yet. When we work with these leaders, we're often asked, what makes change so hard? People have lots of answers for this. You may have some yourself. It could be a loss of control, a loss of familiarity, possibly pride. What people want to know is, how do you lead human, authentic change? So I will tell you all of our secrets, but first, you do have that envelope in front of you. You can go ahead and open it now. This is our Oprah moment. If you're missing an envelope, there are people who can help, I believe. Yeah, just right here. Thank you. Okay, so no cash and prizes or wine, unfortunately. You just get the bum part of the wine bottle. There are 2 corks inside. Actually, I'm going to come down and steal some. One is natural. Thank you so much. One is natural. One is synthetic. We're doing a little experiment here about change in industry. I want you to hold them in your hands and decide which you prefer as a stopper for wine. So just based on your experience now, anything that you happen to know, make a quick decision. I want you then, in just a second, you're going to turn to a neighbor or 2 and make the case for which is better. If you agree, great, tell each other why. If you disagree, debate a little bit. We'll take just 30 seconds. Go ahead. All right, go ahead and wrap up your discussions, your very lively debates. Okay, so let me take just 2, 3 hands. Which did you think is better and why? And I should say there's no wrong answers here. Absolutely not. Yes. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so my business partner thought that, I actually thought the synthetic one I liked because I felt like it was going to be more efficient, and I am a wine drinker, so I thought it would keep my wine longer. But I did love what she had to say because we represent creatives, and it feels more authentic, the other one, and it feels like it tells a story, and wine often sometimes tells a story. And so for that reason, she likes the original one. So if we can combine
I love that answer. I love that you suss out the differences, the different ways in which each one optimizes for something different. You can't have them both, though. That's what everybody wants to do. Any other hands? What did you prefer? Let me take just one more. Maybe someone from a different persuasion. Yes.
Okay. My partner liked the synthetic one better because it would fit the bottle, and it would be efficient as well. And then I also liked it from a holistic standpoint in regards to we are running out of cork worldwide, and so the synthetic one was developed for that very reason.
I'm always a little terrified when people actually know stuff about wine when I do this talk. Oh no, somebody's gonna. But I think that those are really great points. And again, there's different things that you would consider as to which is superior. So I am no sommelier, to be sure, but I have been reading up on my wine stoppers. Now, legend has it that 17th century monk Dom Perignon first used natural cork as a stopper for wine. And as you know, it has dominated the industry since for hundreds of years. And there is absolutely no doubt why this has happened. It is a beautiful, functional solution. And yet, has anyone experienced cork taint? This happens when a substance called TCA is present in your wine or in your cork or transmitted through it, and it will ruin your bottle of wine, render it undrinkable. This happens, depending on your data source, in between 1 and 13% of bottles. So that is a huge problem for the industry. So what does any industry do when they have a big problem? They dump a bunch of money into R&D to get all their scientists working, and out pops a synthetic cork. It is cheaper and not susceptible to cork taint. So is it better? I want you to imagine you are a winemaker. On the one hand, you have a very practical solution to a very big problem. You almost have the future, possibly the future of your industry in your hand. We're forgetting about twist caps for right now for the purpose of this experiment. Future of the industry. On the other hand, you may be wondering, well, what's it worth, my customer's tactile experience of the cork? What are the environmental implications? How long does synthetic actually last in a bottle? Longer, shorter? Do we know yet? So we're going to put it to a vote. If you were the winemaker, what would you choose? And then we'll bring this back around to HR. I want you to hold on to the cork that you prefer. We're going to do a vote. It's a little confusing. You're going to hold on to the one you want. There's no right or wrong answers here. The other one we're going to vote with by getting rid of it. Everyone got it? You're holding on to the one you would use if you are a winemaker. Now the way that we're going to get rid of this, because sometimes midday you need a little spurt of adrenaline, you are going to throw it at the stage without hurting anybody's body or laptop, ideally. We checked with the fire marshals, totally legit. Go for it! Yeah. Well done. All right, everybody have both their eyes? Yeah? Okay. Well done. Now, I can tell you from looking up here, it's kind of 50-50. And every time I do this, it's always pretty much 50-50. We do this experiment because this is what your organizations look like too when they're thinking about change. Even when a new technology, the future of your industry, makes all the sense in the world from a very practical perspective, there will still be value and beauty and functionality in what you have done before. And that's what your organization will feel when you're going to try and take them to a new place. My husband and I have a tradition of keeping corks from special occasions. Anniversaries and birthdays, we write on them, put them in a jar. Now, I am a change junkie to the nth degree. It's why I work in change management. It's why I've lived in 5 different cities in the last 10 years. I think it's great. I always want the newer technology. And yet, if someone told me that I had to replace my jar of beautiful natural corks with synthetic ones, I'd say, oh, what are you taking from me? I am losing something here. I hope you feel that tension like I do. And I hope that you feel when you gave away one cork that it was a little tiny bit painful because you liked something about that cork. There was still something good about it. Now, in your roles as instigators of change, you will come up against that tension as resistance. Anyone experienced resistance to change before when they've tried to do something new? Yes. Anyone resisted themselves? Yeah, I've been there. I totally get that. Now, resistance to change at its best slows the pace of change. And sometimes it's actually fine. But resistance to change at its worst will decimate a company and your career along with it, and I have seen it happen before. Now, resistance sometimes is very obvious. It's outright dissent and defiance. It's awful, but it's obvious. But not always. People in their infinite creativity have come up with infinite ways to resist change. Sometimes it's more subversive behaviors, like not showing up to meetings on time or cutting out a little early because you're just not that into it. Sometimes it's a rabid grapevine of gossip talking about leaders behind their backs. Sometimes it's just turnover. It could be a celebration of the past. One of the agencies we worked with was acquired. Now, this was a good acquisition. People were excited about it. It was strategic, and people got paid. It was wonderful. And yet, after the acquisition, the leaders noticed that most of their people spent their time reminiscing about what it was like to be young and autonomous. That's resistance. Now, once or maybe twice is okay. I'm afraid of kind of killing myself. Okay. Once or twice is maybe okay, but any more than that, and then you're jeopardizing your future. It's like if you had a significant other who was reminiscing about their ex. You'd be like, not okay. Same is true in organizations. It can also be an attempt to brand your change as flavor of the month or just another fad. It's amazing how long people will call things fads. I've watched people call innovation a fad for a decade now. It could be a game of chicken. How long can I just not do your change and get away with it, especially if I know I have some clout? It can be a stalling technique. Oh, well, we just don't have all the information yet. It could be, well, we just don't have time. We have day jobs, you know. Or I'm just trying to be realistic. Any change agent is going to come up against one or more of these types of resistance. It's inevitable. The key, though, for you is understanding what people are actually resisting. And it's not change. It's loss. There's an old saying that the only people who crave change are wet babies. Only if you are like wildly uncomfortable do you want things different. Now, for better or for worse, most leaders in an organization, they actually kind of shield their people from the existential crisis that they're going through. Leaders who are privy to large organizational issues, they go to conferences like this, they can sort of see ahead of the trends. To them, change actually kind of feels like safety. It feels like speeding ahead of competitors, staying ahead of consumer trends, differentiation in the marketplace. It feels kind of good. But to people on the ground, the current recipients of hopefully kind of decent work in a predictable future, change feels specifically like loss. So you ask yourself, if people were to get on board with the change, whatever that change may be, a new agency model, a revolution in your industry, a merger, an acquisition, a new leader, a new strategy, whatever it may be, if people were to get on board, what would they be losing? Now, we have charted all kinds of loss that employees anticipate during organizational change. 6 always rise to the top. The first, loss of control, and usually the first that comes to people's minds. If employees are not invited into designing the future of their organization, change is something that is happening to them. And even when it's a positive change, and all changes are supposed to be positive in the long run, even when it's a good thing, still the loss of control will feel like a more salient negative emotion. There was one leader that we worked with, and she liked to say that even if she wanted to pay out all of her people a $100 cash bonus, that people would still complain that they had no choice in it and it should have been paid out in 10s and not 20s. Loss of pride. This is pride in the organizations you've built to date, the work that your employees have done, and this is excellent. If your company is doing your job right, then people should feel proud of their work. And yet we see so many leaders champion the future at the expense of the past and the present. Here's what this sounds like. Here's where we're going. Here's the exciting new future. Here's why it's going to make us more competitive against all of the other people in our space. Here's why it's better and shinier. So we're going to do this and not that anymore. Now that's great for the leader, but to the people on the ground who are hearing it, they're going to look at and say, I built that. That's the last decade or some of my life I've spent building that. We worked with a VP of marketing at a large brand at a time when they were moving from print to digital advertising. Now, everyone and their mother saw the writing on the wall and that this was going to be happening. So there was no real question about what was going to be the future. And yet, this VP, she had personally built out her print team and had convinced the CMO to give her funding and support to succeed in the way that they had. For her to get on board with a new digital future, to shrink the team that she had built, she had to painfully undo her own party line that print was going to be king for the foreseeable future. Now, she did it, but it was not easy for her or her people. Loss of narrative. Now, this is the stories that you've told about your work to your colleagues, to your boss, to your friends and family. This is what we do, this is how we do it, and here's why. It's the decisions that you put your stamp on. These are all things that are very essential to a person's identity. It's how they think about themselves at work. Now, we worked with another agency that brought us in. Our main client had in both the former head of a department and the new head of a department, the department which we were going to be working with. The former head was being transitioned out to a new role. And our client opened with, "I'm so glad you're here. This department is a disaster." Now we were like, "Oh God, please get me out of here." Now this was like a real shitty day at the office for the former head, and that could have been it, except for the fact that that sentiment had already spread to the department itself. And so we were walking into a situation of change where the leading narrative was that my department's not effective and I'm holding the organization back, and so no, I don't want to be part of your change. Loss of time. Sorry for all the cursing. Now, we give leaders lots of advice. The advice that they like least, which we heard a little bit from Enrique earlier, is when we tell leaders, for any change that you want to make that requires some body of work, and they all do, you need to take that same amount of work off of people's plates from somewhere else. Now, usually we're told, well, that's impossible, and please get on to your next bit of advice. And we do. But think about it. If you're not taking work off of people's plates, what you're asking them to do is to get on board with your change or see their friends and family. And that is not an equation you want to be on the other side of. Another of our clients was promoted when we were working with him to a big new strategic role. Now, we were thrilled for him. He was thrilled. It was a great move for the organization until we found out the fine print on this job description, which read, "We want you to take on these strategic capabilities, but also can you please do everything you were doing before in your last job? You know, for the foreseeable future." Now, it doesn't take much math to figure out that that is 2 full-time jobs. On a daily basis, he was choosing between the change the organization wanted him to make and sleeping. And the last thing you want is a zombie making all your big new strategic decisions. So that organization learned to pull back a bit. How many people feel like this at least once a week? So anytime you are asking people to move into a new position or move the company into a more innovative future state, changing the model of what you do, you are by definition asking them to move away from executing based on expertise. And people like to be good at their jobs, especially if you work in a results and performance-based culture. Of course people will resist. You're asking them to be a little bit crappier at what they do every day because they've never done it before. So show of hands in here, we'll do an informal poll. What percentage of your time at work do you absolutely know what you're doing? 100% of the time? That's kind of a trick question. Okay. 90, 80, 70, anyone 50% or below? Interesting. So we do this very subjective, very official research with leaders that we work with. In quickly evolving industries, we like to see no higher than 70, 80 sometimes. It means that you're operating outside your comfort zone, you are learning new things, and that's great. But if you're asking people to operate at 50% or below, now some people love that. If you raise your hand for that, do you love it? Yeah, some people just like operating there, but most people operating at 50% or below are going to be sitting at their desk half the week going, I don't know what I'm doing. And like, should I look like I'm typing? Like, who's coming by? Like, this probably looks like business. Yes. I guarantee you those people are going to be asking themselves, if I don't know what I'm doing half the time because I'm asked to do something so completely new, am I in the right role or am I in the right company? And it's a recipe for turnover. And then finally, loss of familiarity. Now, humans have spent all of their existence trying to predict things. It is by buffalo migration patterns, likely stock market, who was going to win at the Oscars. It is in our DNA to find comfort and safety in being able to see our future. And change takes all of that away. We worked with another client who's, bless you, mid-merger. Now, this was another good strategic merger. People were generally excited about it, have a blended family. And yet 6 months in, leadership came to us saying, morale is way down. What happened? And even though the change was good, the transition was managed so poorly that 6 months in, people could not recognize their role or their work or their company anymore. And they were asking themselves, well, how long do I want to stick around until someone figures this out? So here's our 6, with some emojis for all the millennials. So the question is, what do you do about this? The first thing is mindset. As leaders, we must get it firmly in our heads that we will approach change with authenticity and vulnerability. Now, we have seen all sorts of tempting leadership behavior, all of which I have fallen prey to myself, so no judgment here. Sounds like this. I'm going to tell people all about the exciting new future, and if they don't understand it or like it, I'm going to say it again and louder, and then maybe that time they're going to get on board. Or it may be to announce a new change and then kind of hide, keep all hands to like 10 minutes and hope no one asks questions you don't know the answers to. Or a popular one, and the tempting one, is to say, well, I'm paying these people, right? And they're professionals, so don't they just have to get on board with it? Now, actually, that may be true, but it doesn't work. What leaders often forget is that they have had months, maybe years, to get on board with the idea of change. If they're a visionary leader, they're seeing the future of their industry. They know how scary or exciting maybe the financials are. They can see what's happening with competitors in their space. And yet, it just doesn't feel like that to people. The announcement at the all hands, the leader's going to feel confident. But to the people on the ground, that announcement is going to come without any of that, or some, context, time, and autonomy. So you can make change happen in an instant. In life, it's a birth, a death, a marriage. These things all happen just like that. In an organization, it's the day that you have the all hands and the leaders say the things, or the day the reorg is official, or the day that you brought on the new technology. But transition is different. Transition is a process. And in fact, there are 3 stages. This was first outlined by William Bridges in the 1980s, my favorite model, and still true today. The first step of change, transition rather, is an ending. Coming to terms with what will no longer be. The second is the adjustment. And here's where you have all the loss. And then only the third is the new beginning. Now, can anyone guess where most leaders want to start? The part with the party hats and the wine is where they want to start, because that's what feels good. Of course you want to be the bearer of good news and the future of your company, but that's not where people are. It's akin to the time a journalist asked Prince Charles if he was excited for the day he'd become king. And he said, "No, probably, you jerk. That would mean my mother just died." And that's where your people may feel too. So, the antidote. What do? Move through each step in order. First, you have an ending. You honor the end of what your organization was, or will not continue to be. The VP of marketing I mentioned at the large brand, they invested in framing images from their favorite print campaigns, so that even though they were onto something new, a small token, they could still look around and feel really proud of the work that they had done to date. Ben & Jerry's has a graveyard for discontinued ice cream flavors. Apparently you can visit it if anyone needs any vacation tips, or you can find it online. But as a way to say, we did that. It's kind of awesome. Step 2, adjust. Now this is where you look at all those different types of loss. You figure out who is losing what, and you stare that in the face. Because the very worst kind of loss is the kind that is not acknowledged. And it's going to exist whether you do something about it or not. Now, once you've made it through this valley of anxiety, then, if you've done the first 2 steps, you get to do the third. And then it's just celebrate. Whatever feels like fun in your organization, you post customer or client feedback on the walls, bring in crowns for the team that delivered in record time, or maybe it's just some wine, that works too. Whatever feels like fun, because you will have deserved it at that point. Now you also have a cork with you, I hope. Didn't throw both of them. Everyone have theirs? So what to do with this? And on Thursday, when you go back to the office, you put it on your desk. It's not stained with wine, so there's no risk people will assume this was that kind of conference today. But let it be a reminder to start with an ending, to memorialize the great work that your organizations have done to date, and say that out loud, so that when you are ready to move into the brand, the agency, the HR team of the future, that your people will be right there with you and ready for what's next. Thank you. All right, so we do have a few minutes for Q&A, I am told. Before we start, there are kind microphone runners on either side. So just think for a few seconds. Any change that you're going through, anything that you're curious about, I'm happy to answer some follow-up questions. If you have any, just go ahead and raise your hand, and then someone will bring one over. If it helps, I know Q&As are always kind of hard. Think about what do you have to do Thursday, and maybe I can help with that. Yeah?
It seems to me that whenever there is change, merger, acquisition, it feels to be almost generic in its negativity. If inevitably people come out of it feeling abused, disheartened, are there any experiences that you've had with change where it is a positive experience from start to finish? Is it possible for it to be a positive experience from start to finish, or is the negativity an inevitability of that kind of change?
That's a great question. And it's possible. I wouldn't wake up in the morning and do this work if I didn't think it were. I will say there will always be some negativity for a few reasons. One, sometimes during a merger acquisition or any sort of large-scale change, some people will realize that the company is no longer right for them, and sometimes that's okay. That's just like an honest, we're doing something new, this isn't what I signed up for. we're going on down different paths. And so some of that turnover, I think, it manifests as frustration and negativity, and it looks bad a little bit, but sometimes that's just okay. Just like relationships, two people grow apart, an organization and a person can grow apart. So I think there will always be some of that. There will always be these losses where people feel like they're losing something, but you can manage that better. And so to answer your question, yes, I have seen acquisitions and mergers go well in the end. And even when it wasn't going well in the middle, that people felt like, well, we're in it together. Like, this sucks, but it sucks for all of us while we figure it out. And the suckiness shouldn't be like, oh, I feel like things are happening to me, I have no control, I can't, I have no view of my future. The suckiness should be like, this is a lot of ambiguity and it's scary. That's the good kind of pain, the kind of pain that you can rally people around. We've found actually that we use the notion of a hero's journey quite frequently, that when something seems really hard to do, sometimes leaders are afraid to share that because it's like it's going to be hard and people are going to be upset. But actually, if you can rally around people around this concept of like, here's our battle, here's the terrain we're going to have to navigate, here's our golden chalice at the end, that it can actually be kind of invigorating. And to change that messaging can work that way. That all said, it is a lot of legwork to get that to happen. But it's definitely possible. I've seen it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm here.
To piggyback on that question, what do you do in the case where people are excited for the change, but you know that they're not going to be able to scale? It's a capability issue where they're not going to be able to get to the level that you need them to get, or it's a skill set mismatch, or any one of those variables. So it's not that they've come to the conclusion it's not the right fit. They're excited, but organizationally, or the organization knows it's not the right fit.
That's hard. So I'm going to be super honest and a little vulnerable up here. I had to just let somebody go for kind of this reason, that the organization was moving in a direction that required skill sets that were just different and beyond what this person had. And that was very sad because she was awesome and excited. So what do you do in these situations? There's really two options. I think one is, which I did, you rack your brain for all the ways that you could possibly help this person grow, or these people grow. Like if you have a whole team of people that don't have any sort of digital capabilities, then that might be an issue. So what are the ways that we could help them grow? And is that investment sustainable for the business? Because you can help anybody become anything, but if you're going to devote all of your time, money, and resources into that, at some point it becomes not worth it. What you do alternatively is that you are fast and fair and honest about the idea that some people won't be around. And so that was the decision that I had to make at that time. And so that looks like a real good severance, sharing that at the very first moment that you know this is probably going to be inevitable, and then being kind as possible and helping those people find something that will work for them. I don't know if this is a controversial statement, I'm not a big fan of performance improvement plans. If you kind of know it's going to be inevitable, I think it's much kinder just to say, like, this isn't going to work, let's figure out what we can do. If you have hope, then of course that investment is useful. But I think there's only kind of two ways out of that I know of. Yeah. Any others? Yeah, over here.
How do you suggest managing through multiple changes and the feeling, especially I would say at some of the junior levels in the organization, that management just doesn't know they don't, they're not defining our mission. They keep changing for change's sake. All those kind of feelings about just constant disruption when you're in an agency. I feel like that is the norm, and yet I don't think employees always feel like that should be the way it is.
Yeah. Right, when everything's changing all the time, it's hard to catch your breath. A few thoughts for you. One is, it's always nice to remind people of what's not changing and what won't change for the foreseeable future. Just gives people something to hold on to. I always give the example that I love change and do it for a living, and yet I make my coffee the exact same way every morning, and if someone tries to mess with that, it's just like I can't go about my day, because I just need something to hold on to know that this is going to be a place of comfort and stability for me. Another thing that you can do is hang all of those little changes on some sort of bigger idea or concept or structure. A lot of times we'll see, like, this is changing, and that's changing, and this is changing, and it feels like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And a nice solution for that is to weave those together into a narrative of here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's how that plays into that, and here's how that plays in, and here's how that plays in. So then at least it feels like all of these little paper cuts are they're getting us somewhere and in a certain direction. And then that can also be your hero's journey as well, that here's what we're trying to achieve, and so we can endure all of these smaller changes. The third thing that I'll offer is that the more you can be transparent about what might be changing down the line, oftentimes the better it's received. Now, we hear a lot, I don't want to worry them if we're not sure if it's going to happen or not, or I don't know, it's like not a done deal. And I totally get that concern, but in my experience, I've always seen it go better when leaders share up front, like, we may be changing this, and we may be changing that, we may be changing this. It feels like it's going to be a lot, and it may not be the right move, but actually what I found is that people are like, well, okay. And if you don't do those things, then they see leaders in a glass conference room, especially if there's like HR in there, and they're like, what's changing, what's happening? And then you get the whole grapevine kind of thing. All right, we'll do maybe just one more here. Oh, we need a microphone.
I'm kind of loud, so I don't.
You mentioned bringing people along for the ride, which sounds lovely, and we all
I
try
know.
and do it, right? But with large orgs, even small orgs, that can be a challenge. So what are some tangible things that you can share with us all that we could walk away with on how to actually go about bringing our employees along for the ride?
So let me give you a tangible tool, communication tool. It's one that we use with leaders when they're communicating some kind of change, usually in like a large scale, but I think it can work in smaller scale as well. It's called OPQR. And it's just handy that it's the alphabet. Here's how it goes. When you're communicating change, and again, we advocate for doing it early and often, you need to communicate 4 things to bring people along for the ride. O is the objective. What are we trying to do with this change? Why are we doing it in the first place? And this can be a time to tie it to any sort of like higher level objective. P is a picture. Like when people look around the office, what's going to look different? Especially if it's like a merger or acquisition, there's kind of obvious consequences there. But who's going to be talking to who more frequently? Are people going to be traveling more? Are we going to be working cross-functionally more? What's this tool going to look like when we're working with it? So picture is the second. People have a hard time getting on board with change they can't visualize. Q is questions. And these are questions that you, the leader, have about change. So we often find people will call leaders bluff if all they say is like, here's what we're doing, it's going to be perfect, we thought everything through, because of course you can just never do that. So we always ask leaders to say the questions that they still have on their minds. Like, we don't know how this is going to go, I don't know how long this is going to take, we're actually not really sure if this is going to work, and yet I still think it's the right way to go. And what we find is that people, upon hearing that, are like, oh, at least they know what's up. Like, they know what the risks are, and they're thinking about it and taking care of it. What gives people anxiety is when they think that leaders are just like not paying attention to anything, aren't connected to what's happening on the ground, aren't thinking about the consequences. So that's Q, questions. And then R is a role to play. And so the best case scenario is that people are excited about a change, and you're bringing them along on the journey. The worst thing that you can do at that moment is not give them something to do with that excitement. So very specifically, when you're telling people, do you want them to share this change with a neighbor, or with someone at the office? Do you want them to give you feedback on something? Do you want them to be part of a task force or a committee to get this change going? You need to give people something to channel their energy in the event that they have energy, and that's an amazing thing. So OPQR is my handiest tool for bringing people along. Yeah. All right, I think we'll wrap it up at that. Thank you all so much.